The tampon king gets back in the ring. I speak of former VP nominee Tim Walz. He joined Beto O'Rourke at a Texas town hall last night, and the estrogen levels were enough to give Chuck Norris menstrual cramps. I wonder, is our strength our diversity?
Our strength is our diversity. We've been talking about this for years as a country of immigrants, and we let them define the issue on immigration. We let them define the issue on D&I.
But I'm thinking there's only one explanation for Tim spewing nonsense like this. Time of the month.
For too long, the carefully curated personas of political figures have dominated our screens, a constant stream of polished rhetoric and strategically deployed sound bites. But what happens when that meticulously constructed facade finally shatters under the unforgiving glare of live television? What transpires when a razor-sharp wit like Greg Gutfeld's cuts through the performance, dissecting every word, every gesture to expose the raw, often uncomfortable truth lurking beneath? We are about to plunge headfirst into the absolute unyielding obliteration of Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, a politician whose peculiar brand of governance Gutfeld famously and devastatingly likened to a man utterly lost in the sprawling, disorienting labyrinth of a Target parking lot. This isn't merely political criticism, it's a masterclass in comedic deconstruction, a public roasting so brutal it's genuinely hilarious, yet so profoundly revealing it might just permanently alter your perception of modern leadership. Prepare yourself for a spectacle that pulls no punches, leaving no stone unturned as it unearths the startling realities hidden behind the political curtain.
Tim Walz continues to be criticized for embellishing his rank and service. After it came out over the weekend, he once claimed to be an official bikini inspector. Walz's direct superior in the National Guard says Walz knew his unit was about to deploy to Iraq and went behind the back of his superior officer to resign. When reached for comment, Walz yelled, "Hey, look over there," and then ran away. Although Walz's actions look bad to veterans, Dems say these revelations could really help him win the coward vote.
Before we even begin to dissect the intricacies of policy and public pronouncements, there are whispers, unsettling truths from a leader's past that refuse stubbornly to remain buried. Tim Walz, a figure who has consistently, almost relentlessly leveraged his military background as a cornerstone of his public image, now faces allegations far more peculiar and unsettling than any fiction. Can you truly imagine a high-ranking official seriously claiming to have served as an official bikini inspector? Yet this outrageous embellishment reportedly surfaced amidst deeply troubling questions surrounding the authenticity and integrity of his service record. Even more gravely, accusations surfaced that Walz, keenly aware his unit was on the cusp of deployment, allegedly bypassed his superior officer entirely, going behind their back in a calculated maneuver to resign. This move, a perceived abandonment, sent shockwaves through the veteran community, leaving many shaking their heads in a mixture of disappointment and disbelief. But the cascade of unsettling revelations didn't cease there. This is, after all, a man who, despite actively pushing for a snitch line to report the perceived infractions of others, seems remarkably less inclined to openly acknowledge, let alone atone for, his own alleged transgressions. Accusations surfaced concerning a deeply concerning personal incident, driving at dangerously excessive speeds while exhibiting an alarmingly high level of impairment. His defense, a truly astonishing claim that he simply misheard instructions during the sobriety test. Such earnest declarations of personal integrity, critics argue, appear painfully thin when juxtaposed against a pattern of what they contend are outright fabrications and evasions. Gutfeld, with his characteristic bite, did not hesitate to label Walz a creepy cuck for pushing a baseless sex-on-a-couch hoax against others, while his own record allegedly presented a far more disquieting narrative of personal conduct. It forces a chilling question. If a leader cannot be forthright about their own history, what else remains shrouded in deceit?
Exploited his military background to cover up his crime. He said it was related to his service and that he actually wasn't drunk. He just misheard the instructions in the drunk test. He blew a super high level. It was like, 0.2, driving 100 miles an hour. And then when he's running for office, he said that he wasn't drunk. I mean, this guy has creep written all over it. He created a snitch line, but lies about his personal infractions. He doesn't even own up to it. You know, this is a guy who pushes a hoax about a sex on a couch, and then the closer you look at him, he's a creepy cuck.
Saw just recently Donald Trump's executive order to make it more difficult, specifically to women, trying to make it more difficult for women to be able to vote. We see one of the first things they do is try and restrict the vote.
Wait, so Trump is making it more difficult for women to vote? How so? Math problems? But it's further proof that the most dangerous thing for a leftist is a follow-up question, which is why you never hear any. But I guess questioning elections is okay now. But the best moment came when Walz forgot who he is.
When a state's once vibrant economy begins to visibly falter, spiraling towards decline, what kind of leadership genuinely steps forward to steer the ship? Under Governor Walz's tenure, Minnesota has experienced a palpable and alarming shift, with an increasing chorus of critics pointing to a collection of policies that feel less like strategic blueprints for prosperity and more like a carefully constructed plan for economic contraction. Gutfeld, ever the master of incisive commentary, spared no punches, painting a vivid, almost dystopian picture of a state where businesses, once thriving, are now fleeing en masse. They scatter as if desperately escaping a haunted house, a structure built not of brick and mortar, but entirely of arbitrary mandates and endlessly circulating social justice PowerPoints. The core of the critique, a relentless, suffocating push for ever-increasing taxes, a financial squeeze so tight it reportedly leaves businesses gasping for air. This financial strangulation, Gutfeld acidly suggested, led him to ponder with mock seriousness how Walz had, with such perplexing efficacy, managed to make even California, a state often synonymous with progressive economic challenges, appear in comparison like a shimmering beacon of capitalist utopia. The tangible result of this approach, he argued, was not growth, but rather an explosive proliferation of suffocating government paperwork, an administrative quagmire that inflicted a debilitating, pervasive collective migraine upon the state's struggling middle class. And then there was the peculiar, almost baffling case of Minnesota's significant budget surplus. Instead of the seemingly obvious, fiscally responsible act of returning those hard-earned funds directly to the taxpayers, the very individuals who generated that surplus, Walz, critics contend, treated it with the cavalier disregard of monopoly money at a government garage sale. The surplus, instead of relief, became a personal piggy bank for expanding bureaucracy, funneling massive sums into hiring an ever-growing roster of diversity consultants, and, most tellingly, perhaps even commissioning a taxpayer-funded mural of himself, portrayed in a moment of deep contemplative thought. This, Gutfeld implied with biting sarcasm, was akin to entrusting a credit card to a sugar-fueled toddler and naively expecting them to adhere strictly to purchasing only the absolute essentials. This isn't sound governance, critics emphatically argue. It's a competitive sport in the creation and proliferation of endless red tape, effectively transforming a once dynamic state into a bureaucratic labyrinth, a veritable Soviet Minnesota that paradoxically manages to produce even worse outcomes than its historical namesake.
Walz is a strange dude.
Oh, he's strange.
He is strange. Him and I are the same age. How does he look so much younger?
No, he's a strange guy.
Strange.
You know, he called up years ago. I was in the White House, and he said, my house is being surrounded by people with American flags. I said, is that a good thing or a bad thing? He said, I think they're going to attack me. This was during the riots and everything else. They were MAGA people. You know, they like the American flag, all right? And they also had Trump. And I said, how do you know? There were about 15,000, He said, could you put out a word like that I'm your friend? I don't even know him, but that's the only time I ever spoke to him. And if you look back long ago, tweets, before Truth, tweets, long ago, I put out a statement, he's a good man, the governor, he's on our side. I didn't know him, but I didn't want him to get hurt. And everybody put down their flags and they left. Yes. He said it was a miracle. He said it was a miracle.
On the same bad cocaine, but Kamala can't speak, he can't speak. Biden was so high he couldn't remember anything. Like, this is literally the dumbest administration of all time. Why is he talking?
It really is the ultimate clown show. And I said this in the 5. He's a clown without a circus. He's
doesn't
just
even need makeup.
He's roaming the terrain. Is there some carnival that I could work for?
Yeah.
I'll wash your windows.
He's a rogue clown.
Yes.
Who is just an inconsequential footnote to vice presidential history.
Yes.
No one will remember his name on trivia night, and that's going to be in 3 months from now.
When crime rates inexorably climb, casting an ominous shadow over communities, a leader's approach to public safety emerges as the most stark and unflinching revelation of their true priorities. Walz's strategy, as mercilessly dissected by Gutfeld, felt less like a robust, actionable plan designed to protect citizens and more like a fragile, deeply optimistic wish. Blame society, hold hands, and hope criminals are moved by interpretive dance. It's a disconcerting vision of public safety reimagined as a theatrical, almost surreal performance, where the desperate reality of escalating violence is met with the disarming gesture of handing out scented candles within the confines of a burning building. Gutfeld, with a visual metaphor that seared itself into the minds of viewers, chillingly compared Walz's crime strategy to the utterly futile efforts of a mall cop attempting, with tragicomic desperation, to quell a full-blown riot armed with nothing but a child's kazoo and a forlorn clipboard. The implication was stark, almost chilling. If a figure like Walz were ever entrusted with the monumental responsibilities of national security, we would, without a doubt, find ourselves diligently learning Russian by the following week. This isn't mere political satire designed for laughs. It's a searing, unfiltered reflection of real-world consequences, where dangerously optimistic delusions often, and tragically, pave an unobstructed path for an alarming surge in insecurity, eroding the very fabric of safety for everyday citizens. The laughter Gutfeld elicits is born from the uncomfortable truth of a strategy so detached from reality, it borders on the absurd, leaving communities vulnerable while their leadership offers little more than symbolic gestures.
I'm especially talking about these old white guys who seem to disappoint us on a regular basis in this country.
Dude. You're an old white guy. And you're right, you are a huge disappointment. I guess hating himself is the first thing he's nailed correctly. Because Walz saying old white men suck isn't a political stance, it's his confession. Walz calling people old and white is like Maxine Waters making fun of someone for shopping at Wigs R Us. He wants to execute more DEI policies, and Trump wants to execute murderous gang members. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. Can you see the difference? As that Walz lost, but one of them, Politico says, is like Walz's wide eyes showed his passion and emotional intensity. Can we show that? There is his wide eyes. That humans would widen their eyes to convey that danger is close. What emotion are you getting from that?
Sorry. Still. That was every...
Paradoxically, Tim Walz, a man who once stood at the front of a classroom as a teacher himself, has presided over seismic shifts within Minnesota's educational landscape, changes that have ignited widespread, furious debate. Critics vehemently argue that he has orchestrated the transformation of once sacred learning environments into what can only be described as sanctuaries of woke word salad. Here, the traditional foundational academic subjects, the very bedrock of intellectual development, are seemingly supplanted by an all-consuming focus on identity politics. Forget mastering math or scientific principles. Children, it is now vehemently suggested, are primarily being graded not on their academic prowess, but on their burgeoning ability to meticulously identify microaggressions and their proficiency in constructing elaborate, safe spaces out of rudimentary craft supplies. Gutfeld, with his characteristic disdain for the absurd, launched into a blistering critique, acidly suggesting that the sole test students were truly excelling at was the perpetually evolving How to Be Perpetually Offended exam. Under Walz's guidance, classrooms, he scathingly argued, have devolved from genuine learning institutions into mere stages for performance art, where the traditional consequences of detention are shockingly replaced by the hollow gesture of participation trophies and the bewildering notion of TikTok therapy sessions. The very essence of education, critics warn, is being diluted, replaced by an ideological agenda. And then there was Walz's startling, deeply ironic comment regarding old white guys who seem to disappoint us on a regular basis in this country. Gutfeld, with his keen eye for hypocrisy, never one to let such a rich vein of irony go unmined, immediately pounced, pointing out the glaring, almost comical obviousness. Walz himself fits the precise demographic he so casually dismissed. This, Gutfeld suggested, was less a profound political stance designed to resonate with a progressive base, and more a startlingly candid, perhaps even unconscious, self-confession of his own profound disappointment. It raised uncomfortable questions about a leader's self-awareness, or stark lack thereof.
Tim Walz vomits more nonsense.
I called Donald Trump a wannabe dictator. It's because he is. It's because he is. Maybe it's adult like Donald Trump, you bully the out of him back.
This is a weak, cruel man that takes it out and punches down on people.
Wow. Oh. Jamie.
What a
Painful,
douchebag,
huh?
Greg. That was absolutely painful. He was the keynote speaker at this conference. Can you imagine having to watch more of that?
So the tone of the media was one of sadness, not reporting Walz's loss, but mourning it. Now, the truth is that a VP debate is like a colonoscopy. It's important and necessary, but that doesn't mean you want to watch it.
Hong Kong and China during the democracy protests went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
Even a deer in the headlights is screaming, "Get the out of the way, dude!" It's no wonder they don't do follow-up questions with Democrats. They're like the top layer of day-old skimpy bean dip. What's underneath, you don't want to see.
The unprecedented challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic served as a harsh crucible for leaders worldwide, and Governor Walz's response, according to his most vocal detractors, emerged as a bewildering masterclass in authoritarian overreach, shockingly interwoven with an almost staggering degree of blatant hypocrisy. He allegedly approached the crisis with the zealous fervor of an audition for America's next top authoritarian, enacting sweeping, draconian shutdowns across vast swathes of the state. Businesses were forced to shutter their doors, desperate bar owners were arrested, and even churches faced the punitive threat of fines. Yet, in a stark, almost theatrical contradiction, massive public protests and demonstrations were curiously deemed spiritually essential. The virus, it seemed, possessed a mysterious, almost sentient ability to respect political alignment, discerning between gatherings based on their ideological bent. Gutfeld, with his innate ability to zero in on logical fallacies, greedily seized upon this buffet of hypocrisy, vividly highlighting the almost comedic absurdity of shutting down Grandma's quiet bingo night while simultaneously throwing wide open the streets for sprawling demonstrations, particularly if they prominently featured at least one Marxist chant and a towering papier-mâché puppet. This, he quipped with searing accuracy, was not genuine public health policy designed to safeguard lives. It was rather a peculiar form of interpretive theater with a clipboard. The glaring lack of consistent application of rules, critics forcefully contended, not only fueled widespread public distrust, but also unequivocally showcased a brand of leadership far more invested in ideological alignment and performative virtue signaling than in the genuine, consistent welfare and safety of its citizenry. The damage inflicted, they argue, was not just economic, but a profound erosion of faith in public institutions.
Meanwhile, Kamala's VP, Tim Walz, is being accused of lying about his rank, which is called stolen valor. But in Walz's defense in Minneapolis, stealing is legal. But misrepresenting your past for political gain? I don't see that as a problem, said one woman. Video of the day, and he's got a very weird way of greeting his wife of 30 years. Roll it. I want to see this in slow motion. You'll see Walz extends his hand to his wife. She grabs it. They shake. He pulls her close and then goes in for that non-friction hug, all the while still shaking her hand. I wish there was a word to describe that. Oh, yeah, weird. I I've seen warmer embraces between Chris Christie and a salad.
A truly peculiar and seemingly inexplicable obsession has undeniably taken root within the psyche of Minnesota's current leader. A bizarre, almost clingy obsession with California Governor Gavin Newsom. It's as if Walz has developed a California crush so intense, so consuming, that he appears genuinely intent on transforming the vibrant city of Minneapolis into nothing short of San Francisco's colder, significantly less competent cousin. Gutfeld, with his trademark dry wit, keenly observed Walz appearing to meticulously read directly from the West Coast script of disaster, seemingly eager to import the very policies that have, by many accounts, have led to significant societal and economic struggles elsewhere. The alarming twist, Walz, Gutfeld noted, seems determined to add frostbite and, perhaps most damningly, deliberately subtract vital job opportunities from the struggling equation. Gutfeld, never one to pull a punch when a perfectly aimed one was available, brutally characterized Walz as Newsom's bewildered understudy who wandered in halfway through the play and started improvising in Pig Latin. This relentless pursuit of a progressive savior image, critics contend with mounting frustration, comes at the direct, profound expense of Minnesota's utterly unique needs and distinct economic realities. This ideological fixation, they argue, has led to a cascade of impractical, almost fantastical proposals. Case in point, the audacious multi-million-dollar bullet train fantasy, a project that seems perpetually destined for completion around the same time dinosaurs stage a dramatic comeback. All the while, the state's actual vital roads continue to crumble into what can only be described as post-apocalyptic Mario Kart tracks. It's a stark, unsettling example, critics conclude, of a leader whose gaze is fixed firmly on distant, abstract ideological horizons rather than the critically crumbling infrastructure and immediate, pressing needs of his suffering constituents right beneath his very feet. This divergence between rhetoric and reality, they argue, has created a dangerous disconnect. Beyond the complex tapestry of policies and the grand pronouncements of governance, a leader's true character, their very essence, often shines most brightly through their public persona, revealing truths that words alone cannot convey. Tim Walz, as vividly depicted by Gutfeld and a chorus of other commentators, cuts a deeply bizarre and often bewildering figure on the public stage. His media appearances, rather than radiating competence, are strikingly likened to a man meticulously cosplaying as a competent leader, delivering speeches with a baffling lack of clarity, as if his words are struggling to emerge from the murky depths of a dial-up modem operating underwater. He consistently talks in endless rambling circles, a navigational nightmare reminiscent of a GPS system hopelessly stuck in perpetual recalculate mode, leaving a trail of utterly confused advisors behind the curtain, frantically throwing flashcards and flares in a desperate, last-ditch hope that he might, by some miracle, land a single coherent point. There's the truly strange and telling anecdote of Walz in a moment of perceived crisis during civil unrest, reportedly calling the White House in a state of alarm, expressing a profound fear of citizens wielding American flags. This perception stands in stark, almost comedic contrast to Gutfeld's own recounting of a past, surprisingly compassionate intervention to calm the very situation Walz so dramatically misconstrued. Then we encounter his carefully constructed down-home farm dad branding, an image of folksy relatability that Gutfeld mercilessly exposed as being as genuinely authentic as tofu appearing at a monster truck rally. This supposed working-class hero, Gutfeld noted with biting accuracy, is more likely to be found sipping kombucha and quoting obscure Marxist theorists like Noam Chomsky, all while sporting a comfortable fleece vest. And of course, no discussion of Walz's public oddities would be complete without revisiting the infamous non-friction hug with his wife of 3 decades. A handshake seamlessly morphing into a strangely devoid of intimacy embrace. A moment so awkward and devoid of warmth that Gutfeld suggested he'd seen warmer embraces between Chris Christie and a salad. It is, ultimately, a persona that feels meticulously manufactured. A carefully orchestrated performance art piece, rather than an authentic expression of genuine leadership. This unsettling disconnect leaves Minnesota's vital rural communities feeling profoundly ignored, their desperate pleas echoing into a vast, uncaring void, a cry for a leader who truly comprehends the realities of tractors, honest labor, and the simple comfort of a church potluck, not just the abstract ideals of endless bike lanes and wherever the kombucha taps might run dry. Greg Gutfeld's final, undeniably cutting, and utterly unforgettable assessment truly crystallized Tim Walz's peculiar public image, cementing it into the national consciousness. He dubbed him, with devastating precision, the IKEA governor. It is a metaphor that resonates with a profound and almost universal familiarity, a product that, invariably, comes in a box conspicuously missing crucial screws. Assembly is always required, and by the end, you're often crying in frustration, staring blankly at a wobbly, unstable structure, left to wonder if you've accidentally constructed a complex metaphor for your life. This isn't merely a clever quip designed for a fleeting laugh. It's a deeply insightful and profoundly critical commentary on a distinctive style of governance that, it is argued, treats complex policy challenges with the superficiality of a Pinterest board, filtering the stark realities of governing through the whimsical detached lens of interpretive dance, fleeting hashtags, and the trendy consumption of oat milk. Gutfeld, armed with his signature surgical sarcasm and the unerring precision of a caffeinated hawk, systematically dismantled every single bloated policy, every saccharine, meandering word salad soundbite, and every sanctimonious sermon masquerading as genuine leadership. He didn't merely roast Tim Walz, he metaphorically slow-cooked his entire oatmeal-flavored brand of governance into an unrecognizable, soggy, and utterly mediocre pile. The most unsettling, yet strangely comedic part of this entire demolition. Walz, in all likelihood, walked away from this brutal televised takedown genuinely believing it was a heartfelt tribute, a glowing TED Talk in his honor. Minnesota, Gutfeld forcefully, passionately reminded the entire country undeniably deserves better, far better, than a glorified group project in khakis. And Gutfeld, with every punchline sharper than a freshly sharpened DMV pencil, delivered a resounding national reminder. Behind the seemingly innocuous fleece vest and the perpetually passive-aggressive smile stands a man whose approach to governing feels eerily reminiscent of someone frantically attempting to follow expired instructions from a broken IKEA cabinet, confused, overwhelmingly underwhelming, and consistently missing half the crucial screws required for even basic stability. The portrait painted is one of fundamental inadequacy, cloaked in a veneer of progressive rhetoric.